Stop, you haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now, we have new stories every day. Now let's go. Marta and I love to linger in bed for a few extra minutes every morning after the alarm goes off. After so many years, we knew what was best for us. Those warm, lazy extra minutes in bed. They had to be paid for with a desperate struggle to get ready for work. A few years ago, the payoff also included a mad rush to get the kids ready for school. Now, with 2 of our children gone, we find ourselves staying in bed more often before the crazy morning rush that precedes the commute to work. This morning was different. I had to leave the house a good 20 minutes earlier than usual, and Marta had to work late tonight. So instead of taking my car, which we usually did to commute together, I decided to bike to work on my mountain bike. The weather forecast promised a beautiful spring day. I finished the last bite of toast, washed it down with coffee, and was ready to go. On heading out, darling, I called towards the bathroom, where Marta was still occupied. I waited for her to stick her head out the door and respond, but heard nothing. See you tonight. I love you, I added after a few seconds. Running late, with no time to dwell on Marta's lack of response, I threw my keys into my backpack and left. I'm Frank Mackey, a 53-year-old office manager at the State Department of Public Works. My wife, Marta, 49, works as an administrative assistant at the main office of a manufacturing company. We both look better than average, but Marta is stunning, if I may say so. She doesn't look her age, and many men glance her way when we're out. 10 minutes later, I heard a whistle indicating that I had received a text message. A few seconds later, my phone rang. While riding my bike, it's challenging to keep track of all the cars, so I don't talk on the phone while on the move. I answer calls at work. I arrived at work on time, but I was so preoccupied with dressing properly for the 8:45 meeting that I left my mobile phone in my backpack, forgetting about all the phone calls. Later, I followed a group of colleagues to lunch. Finally, during the coffee break after lunch, I remembered the phone calls. I had 5 messages from Marta, 2 texts, and 3 voicemails. The first text message, sent at 8:10, read, "You took the wrong keys. Call me." The second message was sent at 8:35. "I'm waiting for your call." Then I listened to the voicemails. The first one was left at 8:11. "Darling, you took the wrong set of keys when you left. Could you drop them off to me at work this morning? I need them. Call me." Her voice was slightly sharp, and I didn't understand why. She doesn't need keys at work. They use a modern key card security system. The second voicemail was left around 10:15. "What are you doing, Dave? I've been waiting for the keys all morning. Call me. I have more important things to do than just wait for you. I've known Marta for over 25 years minus 23 years as my wife." It was obvious that she was royally upset. Anger and contempt dripped from every word. Before listening to her latest voicemail, I took out the keys from my backpack and placed them on the table. I listened to the last message, left at 12:55. "Where are you? I'm still waiting for my keys. I don't know what you were thinking this morning, but they'd better be on my desk by this afternoon." This time, Marta didn't hold back her anger. She was almost shouting. I was stunned. Lately, I had started to get used to Marta getting angry at me over trivial things. Approaching 50, I thought maybe she was going through changes in her body that were making her behave oddly. That's the explanation she gave me when I pointed out her change in behavior. She scolded me when I asked her to see a doctor for hormonal treatment or whatever they do for menopause. Life with Marta had become very difficult lately. Our relationship was strained, but it was strange to see such a flare-up over a set of keys she didn't even need. I was working on myself. I figured it takes 2 to play the anger game. I decided not to call her and just wait for 5 o'clock to drop off the keys. Soon after 5 o'clock, I made it to Marta's workplace. Surprise, surprise, I just managed to see her pulling out of the parking lot and heading home. Despite the heavy traffic and my bike's capabilities, I couldn't catch up to her. Anyway, it was pointless since we were both heading home. I knew she would soon be out of heavy traffic and pick up speed that I couldn't match, so I decided to take my usual, more direct route to try to beat her home. A few minutes later, I was taken aback when I saw her car heading towards a different area of the city. It was a shorter route for me. I could cut through the park, but definitely not the best way for Marta. She turned onto a street lined with 2-story duplexes, parking by the curb. I grew suspicious, so I slowed down, watching her from afar as she climbed the stairs and texted on her phone. Even from where I stood across from my bike, I heard her message tone. She read the message, returned to her car, and drove away. What the hell just happened? I asked myself. Marta, who was supposed to work late, came to an unknown apartment. I grabbed the set of keys I held in my hands to take a closer look. I recognized her car keys and our house keys. However, there was one more key that I didn't recognize. I had a feeling it was the key Marta was missing. I approached the duplex, climbed the stairs, inserted the key into the front door lock, and turned it. The click of the lock signaled the end of my marriage with Marta. I didn't open the door. I needed to think. What should I do? My growing anger tempted me to enter the apartment of my wife's lover and wreck his things. Or I could wait for him and beat the crap out of him. Or I could just go to the police station and march straight into prison. No, blind rage wasn't the right answer, but I had to do something. I peeked into the apartment. Technically, I was committing trespassing, but if I hurried, I wouldn't get caught. The first thing I saw was neatly stacked mail on a small table in the hallway. I grabbed the phone bill. The letter was addressed to Steve Muller. I had no idea who that was, but the phone bill might come in handy. I put it in my backpack. For now, I had enough information. I didn't want to get caught spying in someone else's apartment, so I got out of there. Instead of heading home, I went to the nearby hardware store. Within a few minutes, I had a duplicate key. I expected Marta to be home, but her car was not in the driveway. I didn't know what her lover had texted her, but it must have been a message to meet him somewhere else. I decided to play a little with Marta. I called her, but she didn't answer. I didn't leave a text message but sent her a voicemail. I'm running late too, but I'll bring the keys soon. I'll be at your office shortly. It took a few seconds to receive a response. There's no need for that. I've taken other measures. I just left my office, just go home, came her immediate reply. In her mind, she probably added, and leave me alone, you fool. I had a horrible evening. Marta didn't come home until 10 o'clock, which gave me a good 4 hours to figure out what to do. First, I wanted to gather evidence of her affair. With the copy now on my keychain, it would be easier than ever to do what needed to be done. The phone bill alone pointed to her lover. They were constantly talking on the phone and texting each other, even in the evenings when Marta and I were together. All this time, I thought she was messaging our kids. Did I really need to know why she decided to leave me? No, it didn't matter now. Our love had faded over the past 6 months. Perhaps it takes that much indifference, reproach, and nitpicking before a man's love begins to fade. Now I understood that my loving wife was drifting away from our marriage, but I never knew it. Today's discovery was the final blow to a very painful marriage. We're done. In our state, there's no benefit from proving marital infidelity. Irreconcilable differences would be the motive, and the judge would split our assets 50-50ths. But as a deceived husband, I felt I needed to do something to reclaim some of my pride. I won't let Marta lie while married. The reason for our split will be made public for our children, parents, and friends. Knowing how Marta has changed over the past few months, I wouldn't be surprised if she tried in some way to make me the bad guy. I really toyed with many revenge scenarios but decided not to go down that path. I had only a few years until early retirement, and I didn't want to ruin that. Retirement wouldn't be what I imagined all these years living with Marta, but it was better than ending up in prison and losing my job. Now, at least, I'd enjoy my retirement the way I wanted, not the way Marta wanted. I decided to confront Marta's irritation face to face when she returned from her date, hoping it would work in my favor. Her anger might lead to a minor argument and excuse my icy behavior over the next few days. However, sex with Steve must have calmed her down a bit. Now that I was very attentive, I realized she was diverting her eyes when she looked at me. When Marta finally came home, she was surprised to see me still sitting in the living room. She dropped the spare car key into the container we keep by the door and grabbed her own set of keys that I had placed there earlier. Without saying a word, she went straight to the bathroom. "I'm tired," she said to someone in the hallway. "I'll take a shower and go straight to bed." "What?" I asked. "No love tonight." Her only response was to close and lock the bathroom door behind her. Do you know many married people who lock the bathroom door? I hadn't noticed it before, but it happened often when Marta came back from working late. Oh God, I was so foolish. No wonder she's leaving me. Before bed, I watched the evening show, hoping Marta was sound asleep. I swear she still wasn't sleeping. Sleep was elusive for her too. The next morning, under the pretext of a meeting, I left early in my car. Instead of going to work, I went to an electronics store and bought a few interesting things. It took me just a couple of hours to hook up Mueller's apartment to sound and image. Being in the apartment for so long, I had time to look around. It was very well furnished. Many items looked like antiques, and everything was spotless, not a speck of dust anywhere. I wondered if he was obsessed with cleanliness. Food for thought. I hoped my little spying gear would go unnoticed for a few days, at least long enough to get some juicy shots of my wife and her lover. Back in the office after lunch, I got another message from Marta asking me not to wait for her as she had another late meeting. I arranged to meet with a lawyer the next day. That evening, I passed by Mueller's apartment and saw Marta's car. Despite everything I had gone through in the past 24 hours, my heart sank with yet another proof of her betrayal. Tomorrow would be a decisive day. I drove back home, tempted to settle in a city motel, but it would be absurd to incur such expenses when I'm not at fault. Returning home, I thought about spending the night in the guest bedroom, but decided that I wasn't the one who ruined our marriage. Let Marta sleep there. I haphazardly moved all her things to the guest bedroom, grabbing entire drawers, dumping them on the bed, and tossing clothes from her side of the closet in there. Quite a soothing activity overall. I felt better with each armful I carried into her room. When she came back home that evening, she looked worse than the night before, with that exhausted look she gets after a 5-hour sex fest. Again, she was surprised to see me, but didn't bother explaining her lateness or appearance as if she could explain the reason. I couldn't believe I could cause such pain. Knowing that divorce loomed over us, I grabbed her hand and dragged her to the bedrooms. "What are you doing, Frank? You're hurting me," she whimpered. I forced myself to sound more confident than I felt. I knew I was minutes away from losing her. I had to act fast. "Shut up, you monster," I said loudly. It was so out of character for me to say such things, as if I had struck her. The accusing looks I had been receiving for the past few months were suddenly replaced with fear. What fear? Fear of violence or fear of exposure? I couldn't know and wasn't going to ask. I opened the guest bedroom for her to see her things neatly arranged there. "Starting from tonight, you beast," I sharply said, "this is your room," and I pushed her inside. "We are not husband and wife anymore. Stay away from me," I warned her. "Actually, it would be better if you just packed your things and left right now." Marta was irritated and angry. She resisted, trying to get out of the room. "Oh no, you jerk. If any one of us is sleeping in the guest room, it's you," she said. "I broke my back taking care of the kids, you, and the house. Show some respect or leave the house." Did I want to argue with her? No. I forcefully pushed her back into the guest room, surprising both of us with the strength of my action. "I'm giving you two options," I growled at her. "Either you'll sleep here until our divorce is final, or you'll go live with Steve Mueller right now." His name struck her like a karate kick. Despite her behavior in recent months, Marta still knew me better than anyone. She realized that I knew about her affair and that I had no forgiveness left. She knew I would never take her back into my life, and we wouldn't part as friends. Who would want to be friends with someone who stabbed you in the back? I could see from her eyes that she didn't expect to be caught and wasn't prepared for the confrontation. Within a few seconds, I saw defeat written on her face. She retreated to the bedroom, shed her clothes, and sat on the bed. Tears slowly streamed down her cheeks. She said something I didn't catch. "What?" I barked. "I'm sorry," she said slightly louder. "I was so foolish. Please don't hate me." "You know me, Marta," I said. "I won't hate you eventually, but I'm sure I won't love you either. Hell, I don't know if I can even be around you." I started closing the door but wanted to hurt her a little more. "I prefer to get this over with quickly," I said firmly. "I'd appreciate it if you left as soon as possible. Just sign the divorce papers, which you'll receive soon, and we'll never have to see each other again." I closed the door, speaking to Marta for the last time before the court hearing. The last sound I heard was her sobbing. The next day, I retrieved my spying equipment from Mueller's apartment. My next stop was my lawyer. Since my demands were straightforward, he assured me that the divorce papers could be delivered within 2 days. I paid him in advance and left. I tried to return to work, but it was more than futile. Eventually, I explained my predicament to my boss, who told me to take a few days off. I went home, but when I arrived, I saw Marta in the process of moving, so I parked further down the street. From the video I watched, I recognized Steve Mueller helping her. I had the desire to beat him up, but the extra 3 inches and 40 pounds he had on me made it more of a wish than a possibility. I drove away. Later that same evening, I first felt the real impact of Marta's betrayal. My anger vanished, replaced by a loneliness I had never experienced. Divorce would have been more traumatic if our children still lived with us. What was a blessing was also a curse, as I had no one to turn to for comfort. My parents had passed away, and my brother and sister lived on the other side of the country. I decided to reach out to my 2 daughters. I was surprised to learn that Marta hadn't contacted them yet. She had been constantly calling and writing to them in college. I guess it was easier for her to lie to me than to her own children. A few weeks ago, if someone had asked about the right behavior towards a cheating spouse, I would have advocated for prudence, peacekeeping, and respect for 23 years of devotion as a mother and wife. Now suffering and desperately in need of love or at least sympathy, I told my 2 daughters, Mandy and Tess, everything. I felt relieved knowing that neither of them doubted me when I told them their mother had cheated on me, leaving me for another man. For a moment, I thought they might have known about their mother, but they were very upset by this news, and I dismissed that thought. My barely restrained sobs also helped convince them. Their understanding was a great comfort to me on that day. On that day, I made a big mistake. By the time I finished calling the children, I had already drunk a full bottle of wine. I'm not a big drinker. Marta and I would sometimes have a bottle or 2 of wine a week, or maybe 6 bottles of beer at most. The mistake wasn't in the drinking, it was the self-pity induced by alcohol. Facing failure, a man should take responsibility for such failure, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't understand what I did to push Marta away. My job was never an obstacle to my family life. I didn't need to travel, perhaps once every 5 years for training, and my overtime work was limited to a few fixed periods a year. Honestly, I may have let myself go a bit over the past few years since turning 50, but I was by no means fatter or out of shape. Miller didn't seem much younger or in better shape than me. I wondered if he was a better lover, an area where my knowledge was limited. I didn't have much experience before I met Marta, just 4 girlfriends between ages 18 to 28, and Marta and I had a lot to learn together after we met. I also don't think Marta left me for social status. His apartment didn't seem extravagant, his furniture indicated we were probably in the same income bracket. As I curled up in a fetal position that night, it occurred to me that there was no substantial reason she left, just that I was who I am. Can you fight to be yourself? Can I stop existing for everything to be okay? My phone rang the next morning around 10 o'clock. I picked up the receiver without looking at the caller ID. "You jerk," Marta shouted. "You shouldn't have been so rude to Mandy and Tess." For a moment, I wanted to just hang up, but part of me wanted the confrontation, wanted this nightmare to be behind us. "What rudeness, darling?" I asked. "Is it because you've been cheating on me for months, or because you're moving in with your lover, or is it all of the above?" There was only silence. I hate silence, Marta. "A part of me still loves you," I said. "I won't say if it's my feminine side or my masculine side. Maybe it's my stupid side. But there's one thing I'll never do. I won't lie to our family." "You wouldn't dare," she pleaded. "Please, Dad." "Watch me," I said and hung up. My finger hovered over Marta's father's speed dial button, but I didn't press it. Harvey had been unhappy since his wife died of breast cancer 2 years ago. He was a very good man, but at 80, his health was a bit fragile. I think his will to live was weak, and I could certainly understand that today. He was a good man. I could just as easily let him peacefully pass away instead of ruining his life because of his daughter's behavior. My anger subsided. I decided to inform Marta of my decision. I picked up Mueller's phone bill and dialed the number listed on it. A male voice answered. For a moment, I hesitated. "May I speak to Marta Mackey, please?" I asked. There was a moment of silence on the line. I heard someone crying in the background, presumably Marta. "And who's asking?" "I'm her father, you bastard," I lied, unable to contain a wave of outrage. "Oh, and forget about talking to her. Just tell my daughter not to call me. Forget about my existence and leave my granddaughters, my son-in-law, and me alone. Goodbye." Less than a minute later, feeling slightly remorseful, I dialed Marta's mobile number. She answered almost immediately but said nothing, still hiccuping from tears. "Hello, Marta," I said, breaking the silence. "Had a good day, Frank." "Why?" she asked. "Why did you tell my dad? It'll crush him. His health has been so weak lately. You knew that." "Hey, no shifting blame, you creature," I said. "It wasn't your father talking on the phone with your lover. It was me. I love your father, and I know you would kill him with your cheating." "I want to emphasize something here. Are you listening to me?" "Yes," she said. "I'm listening. Never let this guy come between me and my girls, or else your father will know everything about you, all the nasty details, as you put it," I told her. "Don't think I'm joking. I trusted you with most of my adult life. I didn't think it was possible, but you broke that trust. I'm repeating myself, but I'm struggling not to just shoot you on the spot. There's a lot of hatred for you in my heart right now, and that's what defines me at the moment. Got it?" "Yes," she finally said between sobs. "Mark, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this." "I do too," I replied and hung up. 6 months later, I received official papers defining the end of my marriage. I had recovered from a bout of depression, but something was still missing in my life. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I went on dates with several women but didn't get far. Perhaps they sensed that I carried a lot of baggage. I had a one-night stand with a colleague from work who was also divorced. Sex felt empty without love and attachment. We're just 2 adults desperately seeking relief, but it left me feeling lonelier than before. One evening, returning from work to my new apartment, I greeted a new friend who had appeared 2 weeks ago. "Hello, Jack," I said, peeking behind the door. I was returning to the days when I was single, giving names to dusty clumps gathering everywhere in my home, mostly behind doors and under the bed. Jack stood by the front door, while Roger and Bugs lived under the bed. I was almost ready to grab the vacuum in the closet, embarrassed by the thought that Mueller would never leave his apartment in such a state. I realized that I still harbored hatred toward this guy. I also realized what was missing in my life was closure with him and Marta, of course. For a while, I thought a good beating was in order, but prison didn't appeal to me. I realized I could never move on unless I found some measure of revenge. I spent the evening cleaning the apartment and contemplating revenge. The fact that Jack got sucked into the vacuum was an eye-opener. I had my own plan. The following Friday, I followed Marta and Miller to a pub. While they were inside, I installed a GPS tracker on his car. They sat at a table, and I took a seat on a stool from where I could observe Marta in the mirror behind the bar counter. After a few minutes, she noticed me and said something to Muller. He looked in my direction. I put the bill on the counter and left the bar, pretending not to be aware of their presence. I'm almost certain he would have recognized me now. Over the next few weeks, I made several visits to Mueller's apartment, monitoring his movements. Usually, he would have a quick lunch at a restaurant near his workplace. One day, I went there with a friend whom I instructed on what to say. We sat at a table next to Mueller. We ordered lunch and started chatting. So, my friend Terry asked at my signal, "How's the single life? Missing the ex?" "Well, it was tough at first," I replied. "Marta really caught me off guard. She's always been a good liar throughout our entire life together, but she really fooled me on this one." "What do you mean, a good liar?" my friend asked. "Did she lie a lot?" "Well, not often, but enough to acknowledge it as a personality flaw," I said. "For example, 3 years ago, her car was dirty, so she borrowed mine to go to a meeting. She returned in the evening with a big dent on the driver's door. She argued with me that it was like that in the morning when she took it. I had washed the car the day before and knew very well that wasn't the case. However, after 25 years, you learn to let such things happen with your wife." "And how's your personal life?" Terry asked. "This is one of the good things about getting rid of that creature," I said. "I have 2 friends with benefits, no commitments, and at least 10 years younger than Marta. I'm very glad to be rid of her. You know the saying, once a cheater, always a cheater. But let's talk about something else. What do you think about the Seahawks?" He finished lunch analyzing the Seahawks' chances of making it to the Super Bowl. The next day, again at noon, I went to Mueller's place. Nowadays, I started having lunch late. I took my checklist and read the remaining items. Leave the faucet dripping, checked. Leave the ceiling fan on in the bathroom, checked. Move forks, spoons, and knives to their drawer, checked. Rearrange a few pots and pans, checked. Take the red toothbrush, Marta's color all these years, and leave it on the sink, checked. I took a cup, placed it under the faucet to get it wet, then left it on the coffee table in the living room. After a few minutes, I was sure it left a mark on his antique table. On another day, I turned on the coffee maker, turned on the ceiling fan again, sprinkled some cigarette ash at the base of the toilet, and took a porcelain knick-knack in the living room. I broke it, placed the shard on the floor, and threw the rest in the trash. Everything was done within a month. I regretted not having spy gear in my apartment anymore to see how things were going between the lovers. However, my children maintained contact with their mother. I never asked them about her, but they sometimes gave me juicy bits of information. It was Mandy who first told me that the relationship between Marta and Miller was a bit tense. It was time to stir up the passions between the 2 lovers a bit more. One day, a friend accidentally left a trace of lipstick on Mueller's shirt and some light hairs on his shoulder as she passed by him. Marta's hair was dark. The next week, I went to Mueller's apartment and left a couple of lingerie pieces among his underwear. We wore very different styles. I knew he was mine when he left work during lunchtime one day. I followed him to his apartment. He paused, cautiously climbed the stairs, and entered his apartment. A minute later, he came out and returned to his workstation. "Caught you." The next day, I tore a corner off a condom wrapper and left it on the floor by the bed. I wrinkled the sheets, jumped a bit in the middle of the bed to disturb them, and put the blanket back almost the same way it was. I also left impressions of 2 glasses on a coffee table, some ash in the toilet, and turned on the ceiling fan. I took another porcelain knick-knack, broke it, and tossed it in the trash. Then I grabbed a rare wine bottle from the shelf, chose the dustiest one, opened it, poured it down the drain, and left the empty one in the trash can. That was my grand final. That evening, my phone rang. It was my youngest, Tess. Dad, you have to do something," she cried. "Anything for you, sweetheart," I said. "Help, Mom," she said, barely holding back tears. "She's at the police station. This guy hit her, and she called the police. She has nowhere to go. She doesn't want to go back there anymore. Lately, he's been quite cruel," and she said, "Hold on, sweetheart," I interrupted her. "I'm not the person who can help your mother. I hate her to the core, and I must admit I really like what's happening to her. Not the beating, but the complete failure with her toy boy." "What's happening around, Dad?" Tess pleaded. "She's my mom, and she needs help." Okay, just because you're asking," I said. "Don't expect me to do more than just pick her up and take her away." "Thank you, Dad." A few minutes later, I was at the police station. She was still being questioned, so I had to wait a bit, but I sent her a note saying that I was waiting for her. I must admit, an hour later, I felt terrible when I saw Marta with a bruise on her left eye. She cried when she saw me, walking towards me with open arms. I struggled with myself but managed to reach out to hold her at arm's length. Hey, I'm here because my daughter asked me to come. I said, never think we'll be friends. I'll drive you wherever you want, and that's it. I left the police station without looking back to see if she was following me. Her sobbing was the only sign that she was nearby. In the car, I asked, "Where do you want to go?" "Home," she replied. Without saying a word, I drove to the destination. Marta only reacted when I turned onto Mueller Street and parked in front of the house. "I don't want to go there," she said, holding back tears. "Listen, Mueller is in jail right now. That gives you enough time to gather your things and leave." She looked at me for a few seconds, then got out of the car and headed into the apartment. Soon, she began carrying garbage bags filled with her clothes. She didn't take much when she left me, so she finished quickly. As soon as she finished, we left. A few minutes later, she asked where we were going. I heard fear in her voice. "We're going to your father's," I told her. "You said you wanted to go home. You don't have another home." We drove in silence for a few more minutes. Her father lives far out in the suburbs. "I haven't had the chance to apologize to you," Marta said, breaking the silence. "I regret what I did. I was foolish, and you caught me in deceit. I accept that. But I never stopped loving you. I just forgot what that meant for a while. I didn't even want to live with Steve. We had little in common. I want to tell you that I'm sorry for causing you pain." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Could I say, "It's okay"? Absolutely not. Could I tell her that I forgive her? That would be a lie, as I was still deeply upset about how she destroyed our marriage. I remained silent. I think my silence hurt her more than any elaborate speech I could have given to let her know how much pain she caused me. I still couldn't understand how someone could swear love to a man and then seriously wound him. Near her father's house, Marta looked at me. "What should I say to my father?" she asked. This left me speechless. "What the hell? We've been divorced for several months, and she hasn't told her father." "You must be joking," I said. "Harvey doesn't know we're divorced." "Well, I just told him we're having problems," Marta said. "Now you're definitely in trouble," I replied. "Find a convincing reason, but don't make me out to be the bad guy, or I'll hear about it and tell him the truth." It was already late, but I didn't offer to help Marta move her things into her father's house. Firstly, I was enjoying her suffering a little. Secondly, I didn't want to talk to Harvey. The next day, I parked across the street from Mueller's house. He returned home shortly before noon. It was time to put the final nail in the coffin of their flirtation. I grabbed the cheapest bottle of Chilean wine I bought on the way, a $10 investment, and climbed the stairs. Mueller opened the door and was surprised to see me. "Hello," I said. "We've never met, but I'm Frank Mackey, Marta Sharp's ex-husband." I offered him the bottle of wine, and he took it. "Here, take this so you know I'm not a freeloader." "It's to replace the other bottle of wine I poured out," I said, then reached into my pocket and pulled out a key to his apartment. I handed it to him. "Oh, and I won't be needing this either. Marta moved out last night." I smiled all the way back to my car. I was in a jubilant mood, knowing that Mueller would regret losing his $900 Chateau Montelena bottle more than losing Marta. I had a spring in my step. Revenge could be so sweet. I think now I can move on after I've rid myself of that creature. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.